Okay,
Okay.
good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Mabon, and I am the 2021 Chairman of the Board. Today is a great day with some important updates ahead, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Today, I will be sharing the agenda with our immediate past chairman, Don Williamson. Don, take it away.
Thank you, Kim. Today's call is sponsored by CNC Development. CNC Development is a full-service real estate development company with over 30 years of trusted experience. CNC works closely with the city staff to effectively utilize and leverage available funds to meet affordable housing, production requirements, as well as to achieve redevelopment goals relating to neighborhoods and specific properties. They are committed to the enhancement of the community in which they build by promoting superior architectural aesthetics and economic vitality, and by active participation in community service affairs. And we'd like to thank them for sponsoring today.
Thank you, Don. A reminder, please use the chat button for asking any questions. Not everyone on this call will be able to see the chat. If you have a specific question for one of the speakers, please type it into the chat box, Corona Chamber host, and Stephanie will verbally ask the questions at the appropriate time.
I want to talk about membership. These updates are to help our members. And if you happen to be on this call, but you're still not a member of the Corona Chamber, or if you know a neighboring business that would find membership beneficial, please contact Robert Yanez. He can help you to become part of our chamber family. We service a regional landscape and are not bound by geographical limits. If you refer a member, you will receive a free advertisement in the Corona Business News. So please contact Robert today.
Thank you, Don. At this time, we'd like to introduce you today to a new member of the City Corona leadership. Here to introduce her Assistant City Manager, Roger Bradley.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a great and safe holiday season. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Ann Turner as our new Community Services Director. Ann comes to the City of Corona after more than 6 years as the Director of Human Services for the City of Claremont, overseeing parks, recreation programs, senior services, special events, park and recreation facilities, homeless services, community-based organizations, and administration. In her past position, Ann worked tirelessly on homeless issues in the San Gabriel Valley to create lasting infrastructure and a continuum of care for unsheltered residents. For her efforts, she was named Assembly Member Chris Holden's 2020 Woman of Distinction for the City of Claremont. She worked tirelessly with the community stakeholders and consultants to create the City of Claremont's Homeless Services Plan in 2018 and partnered with surrounding cities, including Pomona and Laverne, to secure more than $1.2 million for homeless services in those cities. Recently, Ann has consulted with Claremont-Lincoln University on the design and implementation of a Master in Public Administration program, which will shape the next generation of public servants with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ann has more than 20 years of experience in academic and nonprofit fundraising, from small private liberal arts colleges to large public institutions, as well as nonprofit organizations. She has been a featured presenter for the California Parks and Recreation Society, Independent Cities Association, San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and Council for Advancement in Supportive Education. Ann holds a bachelor's degree from Pitzer College and a master's and doctoral degree in public administration from the University of Laverne. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome Ann and introduce her today. Thank you very much. Ann, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Roger. I just want to say thank you so much for the very, very warm welcome from everyone in the City of Corona. I would just recommend that if you're starting a new job, don't start during COVID. It's really interesting to meet all of your staff over the computer and get to know your colleagues on Zoom calls, which for me is really challenging. What you'll get to know about me is that I'm a very relationship-oriented person. I enjoy meeting people, working with you, and understanding how the City of Corona and specifically the Community Services Department can be of service to the city, enhancing your experience in creating community here in the City of Corona. So deeply grateful to be here, looking forward to great work ahead, and happy to be of service any way I can. So thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you, Dr. Turner, and welcome to our city. We're really happy to have you here. Next up, we'd like to welcome Dr. Edwin Gomez. Dr. Gomez was appointed as Riverside County Superintendent of Schools following the retirement of Dr. Judy White and began on November 1st, 2020. He has a long history of service in the Inland Empire, and we are excited to hear from him today. Dr. Gomez?
Thank you so much, Kim, and good morning to everyone. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you this morning. Once again, thank you for that announcement. I was truly honored to be appointed as the Riverside County Superintendent of Schools. It was amazing to work alongside Dr. White as her deputy, and now that I'm in this post, I'm excited about carrying forth the great vision and work that Dr. White has started. My background as an educator began in the classroom as a teacher almost 24 years ago. I've served as a principal, a chief academic officer, and I've served as a superintendent in 2 different districts. And on November 1st, I began my current role as the 13th superintendent of schools of Riverside County. And I'm very excited to work with all of you as we continue to make education a priority in our region. In this very brief presentation, I'm going to provide an update on the current state of education, introduce some key initiatives, and then I'm going to leave you with an inspiring story about some of our students in our county that I think you'll be proud of. And if there's time remaining, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions in the chat after the presentation. So in this first slide, I do want to briefly cover the impact of the pandemic on schools. I know the pandemic has been on all of our minds as we're adjusting to this surge within the surge. And just to be clear, the majority of schools in the county are serving students exclusively through distance learning. At this moment, many of you are likely aware that Corona Norco is the only school district to have their waiver approved for elementary schools. I do think it's important to recognize as we're moving forward and as we're in this environment of virtual learning, to congratulate our districts who are meeting the needs of students despite the closure of school buildings. Since last March, millions of meals have been provided to students who might otherwise go hungry. Some schools are providing services to a small number of students with special needs. And so we commend those efforts where school districts are going above and beyond to meet the needs of their students. I also think it's important to mention that frequent meetings are taking place with our superintendents from all 23 districts via Zoom, as we're looking at areas to identify common issues, and we're looking towards creating solutions. Our team at the county office is actively monitoring new developments, whether it's at the local, the state, or national arenas. We're looking at developing contingency plans for delivering educational programs and services in a variety of methods. And I think the big question right now that's on all of our minds is, when are schools going to reopen? I can tell you that school superintendents, board members, and employee associations, such as in Corona Norco, they're working collaboratively and really looking at those next steps for schools to reopen. And I'm assuming for many school districts, this will take place as the metrics improve. Now, I do want to talk about how our COE, the Riverside County Office of Education, has worked collaboratively with the Board of Supervisors. Last April, we kicked off the All for One campaign, and the campaign was launched to solicit support to address the digital divide in our county, and our goal was to ensure that students had accessibility to a device, also to Wi-Fi. Local businesses contributed to the campaign, and we're also given a generous contribution of $10 million of CARES Act funds by the Riverside County Board of Supervisors, which we're extremely grateful for. And through this financial support, 19 school districts, including Corona Norco, were also provided with funding for more than 25,000 devices and 11,000 hotspots for students. And we know that this campaign has made a huge impact in supporting our stakeholders. Now, this next slide is about the reopening of schools. And this week, there are new details being released as part of Governor Newsom's Safe Schools for All plan, which focuses on a safe return for students and staff in February. This is the intent of the proposal. This plan, which is subject to approval by the legislature, includes regular testing for students and staff, additional PPE, expanded contact tracing, a dashboard that displays infection transmission rates in schools, and also will provide information in regards to vaccinations. Funding for all these aspects, as you know, will be critical for the reopening of schools. And in summary, the hope of this plan is that guidance will be given for a clear path to minimize in-school transmissions and to enable a return to in-person instruction. At this time, I do want to share with you 4 of the initiatives that we're going to focus on in 2021 through the Riverside County Office of Education. As we all know, mental health is a very, very important issue right now. Many students are isolated, many students are suffering through depression. And so our intent as a county office is to work alongside our school districts in meeting the needs of every student in the area of mental health. And so we're working towards ensuring that kids have accessibility to mental health providers. The second initiative that we're implementing is literacy by 5th grade. In education, there's an adage that says that all students should learn to read by 3rd grade, and after 3rd grade, students should read to learn. However, the fact is, even prior to the pandemic, many students, especially students in poverty, were not reading at high levels of proficiency by 3rd grade. And we know that this pandemic has aggravated this ability for kids to read at high levels of proficiency. And this is why at RCOE, we're making literacy by 5th grade a very serious goal. Currently, we're working with districts on customized literacy support, which includes dual language implementation, science and math literacy, writing initiatives, and professional development for all of our educators. The third key initiative that we're focusing on is anti-racism policies and practices. Right now, students are very mindful of the racial protests that have occurred throughout the nation in the last few months. They're thinking about what they've seen on TV, the hatred, the fear, the anger, and the concern about the world that they're about to inherit. And so with that, I believe as educators, we need to promote anti-racism policies and practices. In my belief, anti-racism practices can be addressed through programs such as ethnic studies that expose students to the appreciation of other cultures, of other languages, and where students can understand the history of systemic racism and its origins. And the final initiative that we're introducing at RCOE is focused on developing financial literacy for students. I personally believe that financial literacy can be the great equalizer in our society. When you think about the fact that many young adults graduate from high school and immediately go into debt, we can all agree that this is a huge problem. As we're all well aware, sometimes poor financial decisions can be disastrous in the lives of young people, especially if they're taking loans from predatory companies to pay basic bills and even to pay for their college tuition. So we believe that there's a great need to educate students in this area. So these are the 4 key initiatives that we'll be working on at RCOE. We'll provide more details on these initiatives in the upcoming months. And finally, I want to end with a student story that I hope will resonate with you as business owners and leaders in the community. It's the story of 2 students by the name of Zubin and Tenzin Carvalho, who are brothers, and they attend high school in the Hemet Unified School District. And after hearing of the extreme shortage of PPEs for medical health professionals last spring, the brothers decided to take action, and using the 3D printing skills and equipment that they learned about in school, they decided to start their own business called Southern California Face Shields for Frontline Workers. And they've been making face shields and donating them to local hospitals and community organizations all over Riverside County. Fast forward 9 months later, and Zubin and Tenzin, their drive has created a production of over 17,000 face shields and 2,000 anti-scratch safety glasses. They've been recognized by a grant that they received from a Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, and they invested the $500 or the $5,000 grant into an additional 3D printer to expand their operations with other schools and districts. Last month, these 2 teenage boys beat out 200 nonprofit organizations to be named the overall winners at Cal State San Bernardino's Spirit of the Entrepreneur Award, the youngest award winners in the history of this event. So my hope is that this story will bring you some inspiration and reassurance that despite the frustrating challenges of the pandemic, our future is very bright. Thank you for your time today and for your continued support of our students. They are truly the next generation of leaders who are going to do their best to make an impact in our world. And that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gomez. That's a great update. Stephanie, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a few. Let's see. Okay, where did that go? Can you please answer what role your office has specific to Corona-Norco Unified School District and Alvord School District? Is it oversight, financial assistance, approval?
Yes, great. Thank you for the questions. Our direct statutory requirements and obligations, and I as county superintendent, is to ensure the fiscal viability of Corona as well as Alvord. And basically, it's a long-winded answer, so I'm just going to be very, very concise. If in fact Corona or Alvord were in a qualified or negative status in their financial certification, then the county obviously would work hand in hand to collaborate with them to ensure that they're positive in their certification.
Thank you. The next question is regarding basic education. Have we lost that impact for our students?
You know, I would say that the academic regression of our students in the last 9 months because of the pandemic has been severe. We're very concerned about the fact that many students have lost that in-person instruction. They've lost, obviously, the differentiation that can take place when you're in an in-person instructional environment. And so we're very concerned about that, which is why I believe the governor is really pushing towards implementing this plan, which I believe that there may be traction in getting this bill approved. And so obviously we want to ensure, once again, that the safety and health of our students and staff are maintained as we go through a possible implementation of the governor's plan.
Thank you. Those are all. Oh, we just got one last question. Most recently, there was a large theft from an employee with this Corona Norco Unified School District. Was your organization involved in this situation?
So our involvement in things that deal with fraud, malfeasance, things that deal with malpractice that I call of educational funds. We work hand in hand with FICMAT. We work with the DA and the authorities that oversee the legal and the criminal aspects of these situations. Our case and our involvement, once again, is really to determine how the fraud might have taken place, to evaluate and work hand in hand with the authorities to ensure that responsibility and accountability is implemented.
Thank you. Those are all the questions submitted today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much again, Dr. Gomez, for sharing that information with us. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Don for some announcements. Don?
Thank you, Kim. Tomorrow marks the return of the very popular Sales Master Course. This is a 6-part series hosted by the Chamber and will feature neuro-linguistic programming expert Paul Webb. He will teach you how to change the way you do business forever. This is your last chance to sign up. Even if you can't attend, you'll have access to the playback. So register today.
Thank you, Don. If this is the first time you're hearing about any of today's announcements, we highly encourage you to follow us on our social media accounts. We have a lot going on and we don't want you to miss a thing. It's the best way to get real-time updates on what's in store for you, our members. We also have fun contests or ways to promote your own business, so check us out on your preferred channels and we would love to engage with you. Available now, a new mobile app. This is a big deal and we can't wait for you to download it. So just go to the App Store or Google Play and download it now. Don?
Thanks, Kim. Next Monday, January 11th, we have the privilege of hearing a voice you're hearing today for our first Coffee with an Entrepreneur of 2021. Kim Mabon, our chairman of the board for 2021, is going to be our speaker. She's a creative professional with 30 years of industry experience, and she has a great story to tell. And I know that you'll find her very interesting. Please join this free event that is put on in partnership with the City of Corona. And you can see the RSVP to sign up today. So do it now and listen to Kim tell you how she's become a creative Mabon here in the City of Corona.
Thank you, Don. Also save the date for the virtual installation and awards gala coming up on February 25th. We will thank Don Williamson for his leadership in 2020, install our new board of directors, and present awards to some incredible businesses and individuals. I will also be sharing my vision as your incoming chair. Registration is now open.
With the increase in COVID cases and this new strain, our healthcare heroes are facing huge challenges and fatigue. The Corona Chamber Foundation, in partnership with the Frontline Appreciation Group of Corona, or FLAG, will be collecting funds to provide meals of gratitude to these tireless workers. We have a matching grant for $3,000. So once we get enough donations, we can unlock this generous grant. Help us double the amount of meals we can provide for our local heroes. No amount is too small. Donations can be made at givebigcorona.com or by check, payable to the Chamber Foundation. So please donate today or as soon as you can. Kim?
Thank you, Don. 2021 employment labor law posters are available for pre-order now. We have special pricing for chamber members. Visit mychamber.org and click on the store to get yours today. The verbiage was just finalized on Monday, so we expect them to be in stock next week. At this time, it brings me great pleasure to introduce our legislative advocate, Jeff Gibson. Jeff keeps a pulse on what's happening in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and then reports to us so we can stay updated. These updates allow us to act timely on projects and initiatives that help make a difference in shaping our community. His knowledge of complex political issues and great relationships ensure the Corona Chamber has all the tools it needs to be effective. So many businesses and individuals are suffering right now, and if you're not regularly plugged into these calls and reading our emails, you are missing out on so much action being taken on behalf of the business community. Please help me welcome Jeff Gibson to elaborate and bring us up to speed. Jeff?
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. So the legislature is back in session and has begun to introduce its legislation. And while we're tracking that, the governor last night started to leak information about his state budget. He started with something that he's calling the California Jobs Initiative. And so I wanted to, there's several different pieces to that puzzle that I wanted to get out to you. Now, these are not things that he is able to do immediately. These are things that the state legislature is going to be considering adding or subtracting to the state budget in negotiation with the governor between now and the end of June. And at any point, they could decide, because of the COVID emergency, to implement some of these into actual code. But the first being a $575 million emergency grant relief fund for small businesses that are requesting up to $25,000 each. You can get up to $25,000 each, depending upon your provable impacts from C-19. $500 million in support of new housing. As you know, we've discussed, it's in our budget, or I'm sorry, it's in our platform as a chamber that the state has a very high standard for housing development in the city of Corona and throughout the state, of adding 1.8 million new housing units, new affordable housing units, which will translate, if that is actually continued, into several million housing units that are required to be built. We can all talk about how impacted the housing situation is in the state of California, but the problem ends up being, as you add housing units, especially in a city like Corona, which is largely built out, that you also need to have transportation infrastructure, especially since we went for 3 decades without much transportation infrastructure being built, and all of the other challenges that come along with that. So our advocacy has been that we need additional major improvements in infrastructure if we are going to support more housing. Along with that, the governor has proposed $1.5 billion for new roads, and transportation infrastructure in his budget proposal. And that is in addition to the California Transportation Commission approving funding for up to 1,200 projects out of the SB1 gas tax that we were active in a couple of years ago. There are 1,200 projects on their project list currently. Their number is 22 billion, but that is more of a notional number because a lot of that is matching funds. A lot of it is funds that would have to come in from the federal government or local governments as well. So to say that they approved $22 billion worth of projects is not quite accurate in this context, so we're not going to say that. $775 million would go to a number of different tax mitigations, trying to get around state and local tax, often called SALT loss, where a lot of you with S corporations on this call, and there are a lot of people that have that experienced a increase in their federal taxes, despite the overall rate of federal income tax dropping 3 years ago. The rate for a lot of Californians went up because state and local tax deductions were capped at $10,000. So the state of California is now looking at a way to mitigate the loss of that deduction for S corporation owners who have been affected by C-19, along with a number of other items, smaller items in support of small businesses. 70.6 million, excuse me, I'm going to say that one more time because there's a big difference between a B and an M in this sentence. 70.6 million in regulatory fee waivers for barbers, hairdressers, and other small businesses that deal with healthcare, and $353 million in workforce development job training grants for local colleges, including the RCCD. The grants haven't been dedicated to those colleges, but we've worked very cooperatively in the past with the local community college district and the community college district system statewide to make sure that those very, very important job training programs.
Jeff, we lost your voice. Steph?
It's not on our end. He's not muted.
Okay. Jeff, you cut out. Your voice stopped about 30 seconds ago. Can you talk now and see?
Are you there?
Yeah, now we are. So the last 30 seconds of what you were saying was like on a mute, and we don't know what happened. So can you kind of rewind if you can?
Sure. I was just discussing the last point, point 6, which was the $353 million for workforce job training that would largely be going to community college districts, including Riverside, and that we've worked very cooperatively with them in the past.
Excellent.
And so we'll keep everybody up to date. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on these items or any other items.
You had a second slide that you had provided. Did you want to cover any of that?
Sure. The second slide is one that we deal with a lot, which is going over what we've been able to do in the past year, which was to save us $71,750. I can tell you that almost all of the bills that were defeated last year have already been in some form reproposed. And so it's going to be a very, very busy year for us. So we're going to be getting this back to you. The legislature currently does not plan to have an availability for the public to interact with them as a body. So going to Sacramento would likely be difficult before June. And so these types of calls are going to be extremely important for us to communicate to the state legislature, because this is going to be, it seems very intent that the state of California is very intent, while other states are opening up and experiencing a near full employment at this point. The state of California obviously is very intent on keeping with its policy path of basically full steam ahead on lockdowns. So, but happy to discuss any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We really can't thank you enough for bringing this information to our group each and every week. Stephanie, do you have any questions for Jeff?
Yes. Since June is the soonest for legislation to meet in person, when do you anticipate the Chamber's legislative summit to occur?
It would have to be at least in June. The legislature is going to be meeting in person. No one will be allowed in the building. And so the legislature will be able to meet. You will be able to watch them on the Cal channel or online, and you'll be able, when they're in the district, be able to speak to them or their district staff or to people in person on Zoom, but or similar types of items. But the legislature is been very firm that lobbying trips and items like that are going to be something that they aren't planning on allowing for quite some time. And currently the aspect of that they were looking at was June 15th. That's kind of a false date if you know the legislative calendar, because June 15th the budget is due to be passed, and that's essentially the start date for the legislature closing down for the summer session, which would put it into August. So we typically have gone up, back when the Fourth Amendment mattered for everybody, we have typically gone up for the California host breakfast, where the governor hosted, along with the Cal Chamber, all 98 different consulates from around the world that are headquartered in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And that's what we've tried to work with. Currently, there is no scheduled 2021. 2020 was canceled for obvious reasons. 2021 is currently stalled in the planning. And so when that occurs, we will definitely keep everybody updated.
Thank you. There are no more questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. All right, before we begin with our closing speaker, Don, can you tell us what's going on next week?
I'd be happy to, Kim. On January 15th, we're going to have a Good Morning Corona, and our feature keynote speaker is going to be a very dynamic person, Barry E. Knight. For those of you that heard him speak at our recent Coffee with an Entrepreneur, you know he's captivating and electrifying in his coaching style, and it's really interesting to hear him speak. He's coached hundreds of executive leaders and teams in the US and internationally, and has been the keynote speaker for Fortune 500 companies. His topic is called Execute Your Strategy for the New Year. He will give us some great ideas on how to kick off 2021 and set your year up for success. Register by this Friday for early pricing. This month, we will be hosting virtually, and you don't want to miss Barry Knight. Again, Good Morning Corona, January 15th. There are also two important upcoming deadlines that small businesses should be aware of. First, the California Small Business COVID-19 Relief Grant Program has been extended to January 13th, and the application period for the California Competes Tax Credit will close on January the 25th. We will send links for these in the follow-up email from today's program. Back to you, Kim.
Thank you, Don. It's my pleasure to now welcome our friend and government relations expert, David Wolfe. David provides professional lobbying and consulting services, including coalition building, private meetings, public testimony, research, letter campaigns, and more. Please welcome David Wolfe.
Hi, Kim, and hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me on here this morning to engage again with the Chamber. Jeff mentioned the Chamber lobbying days that you guys do every year, and I've spoken to the group probably for the last 8 years now, in tandem with my previous role as legislative director at the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And I just want to say from the outset just what a joy it is to be with you all again, and miss seeing all of you in person, and hoping for the day, obviously, that happens again. I just want to start, and I'm just going to mention a handful of things that I think are important. Jeff spent some time on the governor's budget release, which I will also touch on briefly, but I'm just going to mention a few things just sort of at a 50,000-foot overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. First and foremost, Jeff's right. I mean, it's ridiculously hard to get in the Capitol right now, even as a registered lobbyist, which, of course I am. The legislature's already postponed their reopening by 1 week. They were supposed to come back in on the 4th, and now it's not going to be until the 11th. And, anytime there's another, COVID outbreak, they're going to force everyone to leave again for probably another week or two. So it's going to be a very disjointed session, much as frankly last year was. And as a result of that, I do think there's going to be fewer bills introduced. But I would agree with Jeff, all of those targets that you saw on his second slide, most of those have already been introduced. And those will be threats to the business community that we all need to pay attention to in 2021. I briefly just want to talk about election results in California. I don't know if you guys touched on any of this, in prior calls, but I think there's a number of trends that I'm just going to run through real quick that I think are very, very important. First of all, Props 15 and 19, the split roll initiative and the realtors property tax postponement initiative. I want to thank the chamber for opposing 15 and supporting 19. You guys were instrumental in ensuring both of those got through the process. As you know, I worked on the Prop 19 campaign, and I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to that, especially regarding the intergenerational transfer of properties between parents and children. Another trend and theme, unions really took it on the chin in the November election. Prop 15, of course, the split roll measure failed. Prop 22 was approved, the Uber and Lyft initiative, and the dialysis measure failed. And, all three of those, either were approved or failed pretty handily. They were not close votes. And I think it's important to mention here that higher Democrat turnout didn't necessarily lead to a more liberal electorate on the propositions. Also important to note that 1.5 million more Californians voted for Donald Trump in 2020 as opposed to 2016. And that was obviously key in preserving the Mike Garcia congressional seat in Los Angeles, as well as swinging 3 other congressional seats back to the GOP, something few people thought was possible. And it also, of course, led to Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue winning handily down there in your guys' neck of the woods in Riverside County, Riverside San Bernardino, which is obviously a big victory to be able to hold that Senate seat. Overall, though, the legislature did swing more liberal. There was a liberal Democrat, Kathy Miller, in San Joaquin County that beat a moderate Democrat in an open primary race. And also in Orange County, Dave Min and Josh Newman picked up state Senate seats, and they are obviously far more liberal than John Morlock or Ling Chang certainly were. Overall, despite the increased Republican turnout and the votes for Donald Trump, Democrats did net pick up 1 seat in the legislature, and they obviously, of course, continue to hold a 2/3 supermajority in both houses. We should also continue to keep an eye on the redistricting process going into the 2022 election. Obviously, that occurs as a result of the census and every 10 years. So those new boundary lines will be in place for 2022. And there's an increased likelihood that California will lose a congressional seat, and that could in fact be Jay Obernolte congressional seat, again, sort of down in the area where you guys are at. And that could also make it more difficult for legislative Republicans to pick up seats. Looking ahead into this year, Jeff already talked about some of the looming business threats. There's just a handful of things I want to mention. First of all, the budget. Obviously, Governor Newsom will be releasing his full budget later this week. He's required to do it in the Constitution. It must be done by January 10th. So it will be done later this week or early next week, maybe. I'm not sure. But, in looking at that budget, Jeff talked about some things already. I do just want to mention the other things that leaked out of there yesterday: $2 billion to accelerate school district reopenings, $300 million for vaccine distributions. But there are more questionable things. Jeff mentioned $1.5 billion for transportation infrastructure. A large majority of that money is actually going to be going for electric charging and hydrogen fueling stations. And I do think we need to ask the question, is that a prudent use of taxpayer dollars at this particular moment in time? Yes, California is experiencing a multi-billion-dollar surplus at the moment, and that's largely due to increased capital gains revenue, as well as white-collar workers, continuing to be able to work via Zoom. and generating that additional tax revenue. But those dollars are not going to be there in future years. Both the LAO and the Governor's Department of Finance have come out and said, hey, this is a one-year windfall, that could be 10 or 15 billion dollars. And, but it may not be there in future years. So I think it's really important that we continue to build up our reserves as a state and spend this money prudently. And, is it prudent to spend 1-point-something billion dollars, on hydrogen fueling stations and electric charging stations? Question whether that's true. Also, the $500 million to build affordable housing. Jeff, again, is right. We do need more affordable housing in the state of California. With that question. But yeah, Corona is built out and huge chunks of Riverside are already built out. But more to the point, I want to raise this, that's supposed to build 7,500, new permanent housing, new permanent affordable homes. That's a cost, ladies and gentlemen, of $66,000 per home. Now, it's questionable whether or not this is a good use of money, but the question I have more prudently is, can the state build a unit of affordable housing for $66,000? Anyone think that can happen? I don't really think it can happen. So again, I think need to be concerned about spending a budget windfall prudently. I do think there will be fewer bills introduced this year because of COVID. I think affordable housing will dominate the legislative agenda this year, as well as figuring out what to do about a looming rental eviction situation. And that's especially going to be important in January and February. And of course, the typical crazy bills have already been introduced, including Lorena Gonzalez introducing a bill to unionize state capitol employees. Other highlights of bills that have been introduced includes ACA 1, Assembly Constitutional Amendment 1. I talked about this the last time I was down there with you guys. This lowers the 2/3 vote for property tax, for local bonds and parcel taxes to be approved, lowers that threshold from the local level from 2/3 to 55%. And making it easier to pass bonds and parcel taxes, again, obviously will increase property taxes on the local level. ACA 1 has been narrowed this year to just impact affordable housing. And, that's out of a desire to get more Democrat votes. This will continue to be an uphill slog to get this through the process and get it on the ballot. But this is an obvious assault and attack on Prop 13. And something, everyone on this call, I think, should pay attention to, because whether you own a home or small business, increases in property taxes and making it easier to pass those property taxes aren't going to help anybody. Just trying to think what else I want to jump into on this. I think the only other, just 50,000-foot overview point I will bring up right now is the potential for a recall of the governor. There was an announcement yesterday that over 1 million signatures to recall the governor have already been gathered, and there are interests that have dropped in hundreds of thousands of dollars now to ensure that a recall does make the ballot. I think it is a foregone conclusion that a recall of the governor will be on a special election ballot this year, and we will be able to vote on it. And how does a recall play into the political dynamics in 2021? Will more taxes be approved? And if so, what kind of taxes? The governor came out when he endorsed Proposition 15, and he kind of put all his eggs in the split roll basket. And he said, I'm only going to be going for split roll. I'm not going to tolerate or accept an income tax increase. Or other types of broad-based taxes, and that was not acceptable to him. So, is the legislature going to push for increased taxes, and if so, what kind? Will the governor, because split roll failed, will the governor go back on that pledge? Also, if the legislature does approve any additional taxes, unless they go on the ballot, he's going to have to sign those into law. And is he going to want to sign additional taxes into law with a pending potential recall against him later this year? So what are going to be the consequences for some of that revenue generation that's out there? And another point just with the recall that I want to bring up is that people increasingly think that this recall is going to be like 2003. And I think there's plenty of reasons why that won't be the case. And there's 3 specific ones that I think come to mind. number one, the state is far more liberal now than it was in 2003. And I think the legislative 2/3 supermajority, among other things, speaks to that point. Number two, Kevin Falconer, the former mayor of San Diego, who's likely to run on a recall ballot or as a standalone choice in November 2022, he doesn't have the name ID or appeal of an Arnold Schwarzenegger, and potentially not the crossover appeal either. So that's something to keep an eye on. And number three, Democrats are likely to be far more unified in 2020 than they were in 2003. We all remember Cruz Bustamante jumped in at the last minute and sort of fragmented the Democrat Party and really upset the apple cart in that process. And, it's still certainly possible that someone could jump in and provide that challenge from the left in a recall, but I think it's a lot less likely. On the other hand, there's plenty of reasons why, a recall could well be successful. I mean, the employment development, the unemployment fraud, which just reading this morning hit $4 billion as of today. The abysmal failure so far of a vaccine rollout, especially vis-a-vis other states like Florida, and not reopening schools quickly. Guys, these are not partisan issues. And there is a lot of anger out there. And I do think the recall will be the story that dominates 2021 politically, whether the governor gets recalled or not. So again, that's sort of a 50,000-foot overview of budgetary stuff, attacks on Prop 13, and sort of the political process that I see it in California, as well as a recap of the election. And I'm happy to take any questions you have and go into more detail.
Thank you very much, David. We really appreciate you sharing with us today. Stephanie, are there any questions?
Yes, we have a couple. Here's two related ones. Will the recall help our businesses in general to get the economy moving? And what is the status of said recall?
Yeah, so, and Jeff, you can feel free to jump in here too if you want, but, it all depends on, who ends up, if there is a recall, who ends up running in that process against the governor. I mean, Kevin Falconer has a wonderful process of being supportive to the business community and growing the economy down there in San Diego, as well as really, I think, prudently dealing with homelessness and, some of the major issues down there that impact economic growth. And, I think, that's certainly an encouraging trend to look to. And again, there have been 1 million signatures now that have been gathered in favor of recalling the governor. I believe there's 1.4 million that are needed, plus you need an overage just for people that may have signed it twice or for signatures that are somehow declared ineligible. So there's still a ways to go, but there was
they have 90 days to do it. So
and they have 90, that's true. And they have 90 days to do it because they did get an extension from the courts until March to gather these signatures. So when you throw all that together, I mean, especially with the $500,000 contribution that was just, dropped in last week, I think there's a strong likelihood that the recall is going to qualify, but it's not a done deal yet.
Well, but the governor has reshuffled his staff to put himself on a campaign footing, and so obviously he's taking it seriously too. Yeah. And whether or not it works, and I agree with you that while Schwarzenegger being in was obviously a decisive moment, the most decisive moment, the most surprising moment was when Cruz Bustamante, as lieutenant governor and a former speaker of the assembly, jumped in and did so with a very large, as a Democrat against Gray Davis, with a sizable war chest as well. And that ended up splitting off about 25% of the vote, which was more than enough to allow Schwarzenegger to win in round one of his first election that he faced. So this is going to be a major story when these things happen, because they are unexpected. there you can't plan for what's going to happen within it. So there will be delays and different things that happen. I agree with David that this is going to be a very, very difficult year in the legislature. So which doesn't always mean bad things for us. Frankly, when you're looking at $71,750 worth of impacts per employee that were defeated, in part from our work, but basically we were a part of the business community was extremely unified on almost all of those issues and active because they understood the threat. And David's always been a great friend to us and very generous with his time and insight. So, Stephanie, do you have any other questions?
Yes. Specific to business growth, are there any recommendations you have for those that are currently on lockdown or considered non-essential? We're all trying to create revenue so we can keep our employees working and pay our bills.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of specifics, I mean, frankly, I'm glad, for everyone down there in Riverside County that's not Sacramento, because you guys have taken, I think, a little bit more of an aggressive approach down there to attempt to reopen. And, I would just say, keep the pressure up. You guys are leaps and bounds ahead of where we are in Sacramento. And no, that's encouraging to me. And just, I wish I had, more encouraging things to say in that regard, but I'm happy with how your local electeds are, from what I've read, at least dealing with things.
And to echo that, yes, the position of your sheriff of the sheriff does give you some flexibility to obviously still be responsible. I mean, this is a real threat. We're not minimizing that at all, but that gives you a little bit more flexibility to organize your business and some of your operations and have a little bit more freedom. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult.
Thank you. Those are all the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, David, for bringing that information to us. I'd like to remind you, if you are not yet a member or if you know of a business to refer, please reach out to our membership specialist, Robert Yanez. Meetings like these are just one of the many benefits to being a part of an active, thriving organization like the Corona Chamber. We have incentives for both joining and referring. Call Robert Yanez at the Chamber for more information. Our Chamber is growing and together we make a big impact. Don?
Thanks, Kim. I want to again thank today's sponsor, a full-service real estate development company, CNC Development. Please visit their website at c/cdev.com to learn more about their projects, services, and community outreach. And if you're interested in sponsoring this call, please contact the Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Don. Join us next Wednesday for more advocacy updates and hear from Corona's Mayor, Jackie Casillas. Register today so you don't forget. We want to express our appreciation to all of our speakers and presenters today for taking their time and sharing their insights on today's call. And again, thank you to today's sponsor, CNC Development. If you'd like to sponsor a future business briefing, contact Stephanie or Bobby at the Chamber. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone. Our meeting is adjourned.